How did New Orleans become New Orleans? I don't know if you know this, but you live in one of the most special, unique cities in the whole country. There's not another city in all of America quite like New Orleans. So we're going to talk about what makes it so special and how it became so different than every other place in the country. Now, we talked about the geography, the land, the swamps, the Mississippi River, the Gulf of Mexico. All of those are important. But what's most important are the people, okay? The history. So let's think back to our Native Americans coming to Louisiana from the Northwest, our Cajuns being kicked out of Canada and coming to New Orleans and Louisiana from the Northeast, the French crossing over the ocean from Europe to land in Louisiana, and the Africans coming from Africa, coming from the Southeast to work in Louisiana as slaves. All of these peoples came to Louisiana and brought their cultures with them. Now, their cultures are their music, their food, the way they build buildings, and so much more. Their whole way of life they brought to New Orleans. All these different people brought their cultures. They mixed together to create a whole new culture, the culture of New Orleans. So let's take a look at the different ingredients that make up the culture of New Orleans so we can better understand our city. The first ingredient to New Orleans culture is African culture, okay? The Africans came to work as slaves and they brought their music and their food with them, okay? Two foods that were very important in African cooking were rice and okra. And those also became important in Louisiana and New Orleans cooking, okay? Africans not only brought the ingredients, but also the skills, how to grow and cook these foods. The next culture we'll look at are the French and Spanish culture, okay? I lump these together because they're very similar and they're both from Europe. Now, they brought their music, their food, their building styles, and Mardi Gras with them. Now, I say buildings. I don't really mean buildings. I mean building styles. This is the French Quarter here in New Orleans. Now, remember, before the French, there was no New Orleans. The French built the city of New Orleans. And when I say they brought the buildings from Europe, I'm not saying they actually brought the buildings over in ships. I'm saying that they brought the style of buildings, okay? So these don't look like the Native American chickees we saw earlier. These look more like European buildings because the Europeans took the style of buildings that they were familiar with in Europe and they built similar buildings here in New Orleans. We can see how the Europeans brought their culture to New Orleans. Another point on Mardi Gras. The French brought Mardi Gras to Louisiana. I'll say that one more time. The French brought Mardi Gras to Louisiana. The French are Catholic. That's what type of church they go to, Catholic churches. And part of being Catholic is celebrating Mardi Gras. Let's look at our last ingredient today, Cajun culture. The Cajuns came over from Canada and brought their music, which we will hear in a little bit, and their food with them. All right? You know what? This bowl of gumbo is making me so hungry. Let's cut right into New Orleans food. Now, you may not know this because you probably grew up in New Orleans, but New Orleans has some of the most unique food of any other city in the whole country. All right? So you see a list in front of you. This list is a list of foods that you would find in New Orleans and just about nowhere else. Okay? So New Orleans foods include gumbo, jambalaya, boudin, beignets, red beans and rice, etouffee, po' boys and muffulettas, crawfish and seafood. All of these are unique to New Orleans. They can almost only be found in New Orleans. Maybe other parts of Louisiana. Maybe somebody makes a restaurant in another city serving New Orleans style food, but everybody knows these foods come from New Orleans. Now, I want to focus in on gumbo for a second because gumbo is a perfect example of the type of mixing that happens in New Orleans, okay? We're not really sure where the word gumbo comes from. It might come from the African word for okra. It might come from the Native American word for filet powder, one of the ingredients in gumbo. We're not sure. Both of these cultures had an impact and they mixed together to create a whole new culture. So it's sometimes hard to tell where exactly the different ingredients came from because when they come together, they make a whole new culture. Fill in the plate on part 1 of your worksheet with 3 New Orleans foods. After you do that, I want you to take a look at this question. Why do you think seafood is an important part of Louisiana cooking, especially in South Louisiana? Think about it. It has to do with the idea of natural resources and adapting. Remember, adapting means people change to fit their environment. Well, if people live in New Orleans, near the river, and the Gulf of Mexico, one of the ways they adapt to survive is by eating seafood. It's what they have around them, okay? Now, a few more facts about Louisiana culture. People in Louisiana adapt to their environment by using resources like seafood in their food. Very important point. They don't just do it for no reason. They do it because it's an adaptation to their environment. Our next point. France and Spain are European. The two countries are right next to each other in an area called Europe. And so they're very similar. And so you're going to notice that their cultures are very similar. Another important point. Cajuns are French. All right? They originally came from France, settled in Canada, got kicked out of Canada, then came down to New Orleans, all right, or Louisiana. So that's why you might notice that Cajuns and French cultures are very similar. Our last fact. Louisianians whose parents were born in Spain or France were called Creoles, okay? We had all these mixing of cultures, and so we had different words to label different people. Some of the people that came from France or Spain and came to New Orleans were called Creoles. Creole is also a word that we use for the mixing of these cultures. So sometimes people also use that word for a mixed person. Now, that's a whole lot of facts about Louisiana. You're going to learn more because you're going to be listening to some music from Louisiana to get an even better idea of the culture. You're going to be looking for what are the ingredients in jazz music and Cajun music. When I say ingredients, I mean what kind of instruments, what kind of moods, what kind of ideas do they put into their songs? Are they high energy, low energy, sad, happy? Do they use trumpets? They use guitars? They use drums? What instruments they use? What are the ingredients that go together to make jazz music and Cajun music? I'm so interested to hear what you find out. You're going to find jazz music and Cajun music on the next links on your playlist. All right? I will see you next time.